Welcome to episode 6 of Unscripted with Daniel. This episode is about attainable housing, as was episode 5. The difference is that the last one was from the perspective of non-for-profits, whereas this one is from the perspective of city planning and the Redevelopment Commission, or the RDC. I want to accomplish 3 things. 1, to illustrate the role of city planning and the RDC in increasing housing attainability. 2, to determine the stance of those who I have interviewed. 3, to inform you, the listener, of what actions are taking place right now that could potentially make housing more affordable. With all that being said, let's introduce our guests. First, let's start with Planning and Transit Director Bob Thompson.
Average day could be a number of things. This morning I was up at Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commissioner, NERPC, and it was dealing with the federal transportation funding. I sit on one of their committees up there called Transportation Resource Committee, and it oversees the TIP program, which is set up with all the federal funding on that and all the projects that all the communities within Lake and Porter County put in. So that's one thing. Going to be going back, and we're going to be talking with our consultant about the next steps with the comprehensive plan and also the Unified Development Ordinance. First step will be the comprehensive plan. I could be reviewing permits that come in, new developments that come in, whether it's a commercial development in the downtown area. Somebody's doing a facade, wanting a facade grant, that goes across my desk and review. So it's a wide variety of items. Don Lawrenson is our transit manager and everything, but I kind of tag along, and he does a great job, and just kind of signing the bills there, but involved with the transit on that. We're going to be going over later and talking about the Chicago Dash.
Next, I have George Douglas, the Director of Development in the Redevelopment Office.
A couple of different hats that I have to wear or get to wear. One is obviously you're working on sort of the development side, but then also sort of staff to the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission. So kind of serve as the executive director there. So with the commission. So I've been in this role for about 3 years. Prior to that, I served on city council. 2 years at large as council president, and then 2 years representing district number 5, which is sort of on the northwest east side of the city. And then spent several years with Indiana Beverage doing director of development, director of operations, that kind of stuff. And so I spent 15 years there. And going way back in the Wayback Machine, I was actually in the planning department for the city of Valparaiso. That was the late 90s, early 2000s. So I was assistant city planner, then the first economic development planner for the city. So I've been several times, I guess, tours of duty, if you will, with the city of Valparaiso in different roles. And I served on the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission as a commission member, both as a mayoral appointment and then as a city council appointee to the Redevelopment Commission. So it's kind of fun to see things from different hats or different perspectives, and certainly it's the last 3 years in this position.
And here's Barbara Domer, the Vice President of the RDC.
And my name's Barbara Domer. I am a 34-year resident of Valparaiso. I also serve on Valparaiso City Council. I was elected into office by residents in District 3, so I represent District 3. And I've been serving in that capacity since January of 2024. And then the council appointed me to the Redevelopment Commission, and I've served in the capacity of the Vice President since that same time. So it's been almost 2 years now I've been on the RDC.
Now that we've introduced our speakers, let's tackle our first question. How can the RDC and city planning help? Let's start with city planning. City planning can involve designing and managing the growth of cities by making plans for land use, infrastructure, and community development. What I want to focus on, though, is the UDO, or the Unified Development Ordinance. This document determines whether properties or parcels are up to code. Different areas have different codes. Large categories of this are residential, commercial, and industrial. If we take a look at residential, there are even more categories. There are neighborhood conservation, urban residential, general residential, suburban residential, and estate residential. Each of these has their own rules on frontage, acreage, and a whole bunch of other characteristics. These rules determine density of our housing, meaning how many people can live in a given area. Another limit on density is how high we can build. And there's a general design philosophy in Valpo which gives planners pause when considering whether they should build higher than the city courthouse. They want to preserve a certain look. But since this is downtown, it does significantly limit density. Ultimately, there's only so much land. With the cost of land and generally property so high, it makes sense to at least mention both. Right now, the city of Valpo has hired a consultant to update the UDO. The consultant is Halcyon Levine, which is an urban planning development firm in Chicago, Illinois. I ask Bob generally what the goals are in changing the UDO. Is increasing housing attainability one of those goals?
One of the things we're going to be looking at, and why I like this consultant that we have selected, Halcyon Levine, is they're going to be diving into all of the areas and parcel information they have and looking at it. So, like you mentioned, our neighborhood conservation areas. NC60, I live in NC60 myself, and right off the downtown. That requires a 60-foot frontage and certain lot size. Well, my lot is just a little over 50 foot wide, so I'm already non-conforming. So if I wanted to add on or do anything like that, I could be in front of the BZA for variance. And the question is why? Because a lot of those lots in those areas are that. So, I mean, there's where we're looking at it, cleanup and everything like that. They're going to actually go in and look at this and then see whether or not the standards we have in place are good, or, if we apply it into this NC60, how many of these lots are already non-conforming? And then we try to figure out, what is a good frontage requirement then, or lot width requirement.
That makes sense, because if our own properties that exist don't even fit the regulations of the UDO, then why do we have those regulations?
and that's part of the cleanup.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the particular neighborhood I'm in, there are a number of lots that are probably smaller than 60.
Since I didn't think he answered in regards to the affordable housing question, I got more specific. I asked about lot sizes. Neighborhood conservation property. It has 6,000 square foot minimum. And are those regulations on those lot sizes something that are under consideration for the new UDO, or is it just mostly let's pretty up the document so that it's more readable and user-friendly?
I think everything is going to be on the table as far as looking at it on that. I mean, do we want to clean it up and make it user-friendly? Without a doubt. But I think everything needs to be on the table as far as a discussion.
And then looking back at the footage, I realized I was a bit too specific, and his answer basically could mean that they're looking to increase or decrease the required amount of acreage. It was ambiguous, so I sent an email asking if they're looking to lower the actual required acreages, and he said that will be reviewed in the UDO process. So he has confirmed that that is something that's also on the table. Okay, so is there anything else that city planning is also changing? Yes, there is. The comprehensive plan. The document is meant to outline the goals or the what and why of a community. Just for some history, the last time the comprehensive plan changed was in 2013, and the last time the UDO changed was in 2009. The reform to the UDO will take 2 years. However, it seems the comprehensive plan might be being able to update even sooner. Bob says public comment on the comprehensive plan will happen as early as January. I asked if the East Side Valpo development will be discussed there. I want to hear how this comprehensive plan ties in with this project here. Is this sort of in question at this public comment, and how are you discussing it in relation to the comprehensive plan?
The very first meetings that they have with the public input and the public open house probably will not be diving this deep into it.
I see.
Is what that is. It's
so in the very first one, but
later on, going forward, when they start looking at the different land uses going throughout the city and what our future land uses should be as far as the growth of the city or the redevelopment within certain parts inside the city, then they'll start looking at these. And they'll bring it up to the public and they'll show it and get more public input on it.
In addition to the public input for the comprehensive plan, there will be online surveys that will help inform them in the process as well of making that comprehensive plan. And Bob goes into detail here.
They're going to get a survey going out on that, a website going and a survey going out. What do you like about Valpo? What do you not like about Valpo? What kind of development do you like about that's going on within Valpo? What do you not like?
Yeah.
Kind of what they see as a strengths type and weakness type approach, or I shouldn't say a positive or a negative type approach. So, I mean, they're going to be looking at that. They're going to be doing surveys on that. That should be going out maybe December and January with the surveys and going out. So, number of questions on it. So, and one of the features I do like where there's an interactive map where people are going to be able to go onto the website, actually look at an interactive map and actually draw on the map, save it and say, this part, I think they did a good job. This is good development. Like to see more of this. Draw a circle around something they don't like and say, I don't want to see any more of this. So, I mean, there is going to be that interactive map on that.
Cool.
We've got going.
So, are there any other indicators that city planning is interested in increasing housing attainability? I would say yes. City planning is also involving We Make Indiana in the comprehensive plan via a focus group. Yes, the same We Make Indiana whose expressed goal for Portage County is to increase housing attainability. Here's Bob confirming their involvement.
I did reach out and contact We Make Indiana to see if they wanted to be one of the focus groups for sitting down and discussing items with our consultant doing the comprehensive plan on that. And yes, these comments that we're going to be picking up from people in the focus groups could be into goals and the policies that we look forward into the land development that we see within this document or how we want to proceed and implement within the city. So, which is then leads us into the next step is the Unified Development Ordinance, because our policies, our ordinance, I should say, should be going along with the policies that we set off in the comprehensive plan.
So, I've accomplished all three goals in respect to city planning. To summarize, number 1, the goals set forth in the comprehensive plan and the legal codes that enforce them play an important role in the density and, by extension, affordability of housing. Number 2, Bob is open to the idea of changing codes to increase affordability, as evidenced in word and by his willingness to have We Make Indiana be a part of a focus group advising city planning on the comprehensive plan. Number 3, both the comprehensive plan and the UDO are being updated, and all signs point to a willingness to increase housing attainability. And now for an ad about this show. Do you enjoy the content that I produce here on Unscripted with Daniel? Well, I'm going to continue to produce that content, and I hope you'll stick around, because I aim to make a difference with what I'm producing, and I'd like your help. In fact, I need your help. So it helps if you click subscribe. Like the video, you could do that on Facebook or you could do that on YouTube. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and now back to Unscripted with Daniel. Next, let's tackle the RDC's role in increasing housing attainability. The role of the RDC generally is to increase economic development, while at the same time not increasing the tax rate. They have a mechanism to achieve this, tax incremented financing, which makes a baseline tax revenue at the time of purchase by the RDC payable to the city, and then any increase in value or revenue is cycled back into the RDC for further development. I'm sure that George can more comprehensively explain what a TIF zone is, so I'm going to go ahead and let him explain it for you guys. For some reason, I can't even remember what the initials of TIF stand for. I'm sure most people...
increment financing.
Tax increment financing, which means that for a long period of time, they will not be taxed directly by the city, but instead is reinvested in some way. But where's the money going?
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And again, it's not complicated, and sometimes it's easier to show visually, but sort of think of it as if the Redevelopment Commission, and again, they can't unilaterally decide to establish a TIF district or an allocation area, a tax allocation area. So that requires, it starts with the Redevelopment Commission, goes to the Plan Commission, there's public hearings, onto the City Council, back then to the Redevelopment Commission. So there's multiple steps in the process, very public, with public hearings and so forth to establish it. And once you establish a allocation area or a TIF district, it sort of establishes a base, a property tax base of what the assessed valuation is on that property. Now, ideally, you're doing it on property that's about to be redeveloped, right? Because you don't want to, it wouldn't do any good to capture or create an allocation area after the development, after it's already been assessed, because you're only capturing the increment, the increase after you establish it. So, so creating the TIF district just establishes a base. And then any future development, once that development happens, the county comes in, the assessor comes in, assesses the property and says, okay, now it's gone from a base of, let's make the numbers simple and say $1,000 is the assessed valuation, and now the assessed valuation is $1 million. So that $999,000 is captured and collected. Now it's just the assessed valuation, then whatever the tax rate is for the city or in township at that point is what's captured, and it is remitted to the Valparaiso Redevelopment Commission. So then that is now in the hands of the Redevelopment Commission then to spend those dollars in there. It may not even go directly to that project. And I can go through some of the projects that we use allocation dollars towards. Very few really directly go to what I would say the development itself.
I see.
And so a lot of cases, there's a number of different things that it goes to that are of more public benefit and more directed elsewhere, such as the workforce housing we just talked about. So that's an example of then, so the Redevelopment Commission captures that, and then that's what we then have to establish our budget on, is those dollars that are coming in. And so, yeah, those are sort of what we use then for a variety of different projects and initiatives. And an example would be we do school challenge grants out of our TIF dollars. So those go to both East Porter County and in Valparaiso community schools. Sidewalks and pathways can be used out of TIF dollars. Sometimes we use it, there's been paving that we do, a lot of industrial sort of development and infrastructure improvement. The workforce housing, workforce and attainable housing is very much an economic development related initiative. And so dollars could go towards that. More specifically, some of our grants that we receive and federal and state grants that run through the Northern Indiana Regional Plan Commission or NERPC require, like it is an 80% federal grant or state grant, and then we have to provide the local match. We use those TIF dollars as the local match.
I see.
So when you think about like some of the public infrastructure roundabouts at Silhavy Road and LaPorte Avenue, for example, we've got one coming up on Campbell Street and Lincoln Way,
right,
for example. And so those dollars that are captured through the TIF. So we use development to help pay for some of the infrastructure that needs to be done. And so, because again, the city is very limited on what resources they have available. And so this is one way to have development sort of pay for the infrastructure related to not only that development, but also other development.
I see. Well, surely there's an economic interest in having people in Valpo live there and contributing to their tax base. Let's listen to George describe a new initiative that uses those very RDC revenues to help builders build more affordable housing and help the Valpo workforce afford it.
The Redevelopment Commission specifically, I think you were asking about, the affordable housing and other things. And so in the 2025 budget of the Redevelopment Commission, we set aside kind of a new initiative or program, $1 million the commission approved for the budget this year. And it was kind of think of it in three sort of buckets. One bucket would be sort of with land acquisition, and this would be to help nonprofit organizations that are sort of looking at housing, in particular workforce housing type of stuff. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of $500,000 in that. $250,000 would be going towards infrastructure. Mm-hmm. So again, if you had water line extensions, sewer extensions, those kind of things of public utility or infrastructure. So we had money set aside for that, and then another $250,000 towards initiatives. And I think that the commission was sort of thinking about down payment assistance or other sort of initiatives that would sort of work under this workforce attainable housing umbrella, I guess, if you will. And so this last year, we've really spent a lot of time kind of coming up with the guidelines and then an application. Mm-hmm. And so the commission, we didn't get that sort of done until, I think that was at our September meeting. That we had both the application and guidelines for the program, how these dollars would get. It's a new program, so we're kind of making this up. We're developing this as we got into the year, and so with a lot of input, we did that. The commission approved it, and then at the last meeting, we had our first application come through. That was from Paradise Community Homes. And they had an application for under the initiatives portion of it for $50,000, and so that was going towards down payment assistance on 5 homes that they have built on Kinsey Street, which is just off Joliet Road and Stokes Road on sort of the west side of the city. So I think we just had that approved, and the commission just signed off on the grant agreement. That was the next piece we had to create once we had an application, was actually the agreement to the mechanism to actually make it work. And so we just got that signed actually last night, yesterday evening. So it's been a lot of work to get to that point. So we're excited really to have the first of hopefully many opportunities and applications looking at this particular issue that will involve the Redevelopment Commission directly.
That's very interesting, and that's for the Paradise Homes, right?
Yeah, this application, yeah.
But so that application could be used in any number of future or present RDC development projects.
Yeah.
Essentially, right?
Yeah, correct. And so on our city's website, there's information there on the guidelines as well as the application. And again, think of there's 3 different opportunities, and you can have an organization that's can hit all 3 of these in one particular project. They can have money for property acquisition, they can have money to help extend public infrastructure, and then they can also use grant dollars towards down payment assistance and so forth. And so it's kind of unique, and I think I'm not aware of other redevelopment commissions, certainly in this area. I'm not saying we're the only one in the state of Indiana, but certainly we are, the commission is focused on this. And then also at the last meeting in earlier this month, the commission approved their 2026 budget. And so, again, we had $1 million for this year, and so far we have 50,000 committed of the 1 million. And so for next year, we actually increased the budget to 1.75 million towards workforce attainable housing. And so we're really excited about that. Hope other organizations will get behind this. It doesn't have to be nonprofits. We kind of want to have qualified nonprofits sort of be the lead on this, but they could also be working with private development. And so it's kind of a partnership that way. So Habitat for Humanity, for example, could certainly come in and say, we've identified lots here, can you help us with that? And again, you can think about there's a number of different ways that these dollars can be used from a variety of different organizations that are sort of focused on this. One of the key tenets of the program the Commission identified, though, this is not for rental, this is really for owner-occupied sort of housing. And again, we sort of define, because there's many definitions for affordable housing or attainable housing or workforce housing. And so the Commission kind of looked at housing units that will be below 300,000. And so that's one. And then secondly, for some of the other criteria dealing like down payment assistance and stuff like that, it's really looking at an AMI of 60 to, I think, 120%. AMI for the area median income is what AMI stands for.
Area median income.
Yeah, so that will be adjusted, annually, depending, however often that number comes out, as long as the program hits that.
I wanted to ask George one more time what those 3 buckets of funding were for this workforce housing initiative because honestly, I heard them once and they were so good, I wasn't sure that I believed it. Can you just break down clearly those 3 portions of those grants? Because I know you mentioned the 3 portions. What are those 3 portions of the workforce housing?
So yeah, the 3 buckets that makes up and again, it's kind of think of it, we have, now for 2026, 1.75 million, and the Commission kind of looked at, it could be for property acquisition, so buying land, so it has to be in the city, it has to then get zoned appropriately and, go through, subdivision process and some of the planning and that kind of stuff. The other would be sort of public infrastructure, so it could be road improvements. So, we really were very intentional about, especially on infill projects. And so if you've got a project that's, let's just say, is on land that's in city now, and it's maybe been passed up for development because there's a lot of challenges with it. You need to bring a water line to it or sewer line. The road needs to be upgraded and repaved, or there's no sidewalks. And so we set aside dollars then that could be used for those things, because all of those costs of the developer or whoever's taking the project is added on to the cost of the units. And so if we can look at those things that are sort of a public benefit in serving not just this development but other development, these dollars would be great to help reduce and offset the end product cost. And so we put money in there. Then the last piece was that the sort of grant initiatives was sort of the down payment assistance and some thing. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And I shouldn't, this is not a space that I'm directly involved in every day. And so a lot of organizations, but a lot of the feedback we heard, again, is one of the challenges is just, for people that want to find and be able to move into a home is the down payment. It's sort of having that equity available to be able to do that. And so with Paradise Homes, they're working very closely with a lot of banks, and so that's been, they've really been able to access different programs and really understand it. And so we were excited to have their application come through. And again, there's a limit of 10,000 per household or per unit that can go for the grant initiatives portion of it, not the overall.
And now, an ad for WVLP, the station that makes this broadcast possible. Are you an avid WVLP listener? Do you enjoy the wide range of content, whether it's the news, local events, or food reviews? Well, there's a way that you can support your local community radio station. What you can do is go to wvlp.org/support. For as little as a cup of coffee a month, you can support WVLP and help continue our mission of bringing you local community radio. If this is something that's important to you, you can go there today, wvlp.org/support. Thank you. And now back to Unscripted with Daniel. Barbara Domer also talks about the workforce housing grant, and she speaks about it from a slightly different angle, from the perspective of all the people who are not able to afford a home in Valparaiso and who really should. She also lends her own perspective from her own experience and difficulties buying her first home.
And that's why the RDC having allocated now some budget resources. That's another thing that's it's great news for folks like teachers, first responders, our police, our fire, our EMS, and nurses as well. These are the community members. We want them, they're serving in such vital, important capacities within our community. Yeah. And I, for one, want them all living in our community.
Yeah.
So the idea behind the grants is to, kind of just help people get over that first hump of home ownership. And so the first, because the budget itself is allocated and divided into 3 sections for housing initiatives and grants, property and acquisition, and infrastructure. So we've got $1.75 million in 2026 that's budgeted in the RDC for these housing initiatives. And and so the grants, for example, down payment assistance grants are capped at $10,000 per applicant. But, I think about and like I said, I've lived in this community for 34 years, but when I first moved in here, I was married, and we scraped together that down payment. We were both working, had 1 child, and, it was like, okay, we could buy a house. And we bought the house, and then it was like, oh yeah, then there's closing costs and appliances. I mean, those things, it's so important. It's like, wow, okay, we have to spend like, $4,000 to get whatever at that time, refrigerator, stove, washer, dryer.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And then, furniture, that was like, okay, we're bringing the stuff over from the townhouse. And didn't have new furniture for a while. But anyway, so, this is like getting, I'm excited about this grant program because it is really going to help people just boost that first home is so important. And if you can buy it in Valparaiso, yes.
Another cost is, of course, taxes. TIFs are active for 20 to 30 years. While a TIF is active, the increase in assessed value is not taken into account by the city, and therefore the increase in value doesn't affect surrounding properties to have an increase in their property taxes. Here's George explaining that. The tax rate is actually going down because of it being offset by, I want to unpack
assessed valuation. So yes, your tax rates in effect is really based on the assessed valuation. So if you look at the growth of assessed valuation, and I would encourage people to not just look at Valparaiso's growth in assessed valuation, look at the county, look at all the surrounding area. So as our assessed valuation goes up, which means the pie is bigger, right? We have more assessed valuations, which means your tax rate goes lower because we have more dollars to
and when we're saying assessed value, are we talking about land, property?
Real property. It could be real property. So you have land, you have improvements, right? So you've got a vacant land is got at a certain assessed valuation. Let's take a house, for example. Then the improvements have a certain assessed valuation.
Right.
And then if there's a business and there's business personal property, equipment, then that's assessed. So all of those go into the bucket.
I want to get into the city's goals set forth by the current mayor, Mayor Costas. He's made a statement saying that attainable housing is a goal. And Barbara Domer thinks this is important, so let's listen in. You said that Valparaiso is making some promises, which seems like a good thing.
It definitely is. I'm really excited about this initiative. And, when I talk about housing, I like to refer to it as attainable housing, because I really feel that kind of broadens that housing spectrum by saying, as opposed to affordable, sometimes people have a different impression of what affordable is. So attainable is something that we're kind of broadening that economic spectrum a little bit and saying we want more folks to be able to come into our community and have affordable housing that's attainable to them.
Yeah.
And so, it's probably been throughout most of 2025 that the city of Valparaiso has, I believe, made a priority to make a statement about the need for more types of housing in our community. So I brought this City Talk magazine with me because they had a front page spread on Valpo works to support balanced housing. And so, the mayor made a statement in this article where, he says, like good communities nationwide, we're studying our housing stock and looking for ways to provide a variety of options to support our diverse community. That's a pretty powerful statement.
It is.
Because that's saying we're not just looking at one aspect of the economic spectrum here.
Right.
We know we have a diverse community, and that's what makes the fabric of our community so great.
Right.
Is because there's all kinds of folks here in the city. And so now we know that there are struggles and roadblocks that are impeding a lot of people who we want to stay in our community, impeding them from planting roots here.
Yeah.
And so I felt like with the city making that statement, it kind of lays the groundwork for all others in the community to say, this is a priority. And so we're going to look to ways to prioritize making this a reality for more people to come in our community or stay. And one thing, a couple of months ago when we approved, the city council approves the school budget, and the superintendent and the CFO of the school corporation presented the budget and talked about the enrollment. And from 2024 school year, 2024-25 school year to 25-26 school year, our Valparaiso community school system had a decrease in enrollment of 70 students. Now that's not a lot, but what is significant is that the decrease was much heavier in the lower grades than the higher grades. So like kindergarten enrollment decreased sharply. I don't have the statistics on that. I wish I did, but I did. I have reached out to the superintendent to ask him for an exact number because I thought that was very, it's kind of like that's a warning bell, right?
Yeah.
By saying like, okay, well, we're developing neighborhoods and subdivisions in our community, but yet our kindergarten enrollment is down. And so what that tells me, I mean, it's not the only reason our kindergarten enrollment is down because there are other factors as well. People just aren't having as many children, right. Things that the city obviously cannot control. But one thing that it tells me is that young folks are having a harder time setting roots in our community.
Then Barbara Domer goes into some of the details of what's actually happening to increase attainable housing in Valparaiso. Now, it's not just his statement. There's actual material things that we're doing within the city. Could you go into some of the details of what's actually going on to make steps towards attainable housing?
Well, so the city is clearly leaning on the Redevelopment Commission to help to try to not necessarily solve the problem, but at least to make progress. And so I, just brought along a copy of the ordinance establishing the Redevelopment Commission because, when I first was appointed to the commission, I was like, I really want to understand what the objective here of this is, because for the public, the Redevelopment Commission has kind of been mysterious for the residents of the community. It's like, what do they do? And then you listen to the meetings and you're like, I don't know what just happened. but they voted on something. And so I try, in my role, I do ask a lot of questions. And sometimes I may even have asked the question prior to the meeting, but I do that because I want to be able to articulate that, this is what I'm looking at when I'm looking at invoices or, contracts or whatever. So to try to share more information with the community. But when the RDC was established, it was to afford a maximum opportunity for rehabilitation, redevelopment, and development to improve so it's to increase economic development within our city, right? And so when I think about that being the RDC's goal, and the fact that this financing, the TIF, is coming in to the RDC, the goal is to be able to provide increased economic development to our city. And so then I think about housing, and it's like, okay, housing is economic development, right? So, a lot of times you think like, oh, economic development is like, we want to bring a factory in here. And it's like, yeah, sure. I hope more come. That would be awesome in the right place in the city. But housing itself is economic development, and there are a lot of components to it. So it's like when housing is being built, the people who are building the housing have jobs, right? And hopefully they're local to our community. That's one thing that we really stress, although it's not mandated, but we really want to bring people into our community that are working in our community and living in our community, because when you're working and living in Valparaiso, that means that you are spending money in Valparaiso. Right? So you're going to the grocery stores, and you're going to the department store and restaurants and gas stations, the whole gamut. And so then what that does, that increase in local spending, increases tax revenue, right? And so the tax revenue then is what funds our city's budget, and also as a connection, the RDC as well. Because it's all based on property taxes, and if some of that property tax money is being diverted to the RDC, it's our money, right? And so when we have more people that are living and working in our community and contributing to our community benefits by it. And so that's what I mean by housing is economic development. So it's like a perfect fit. Right? So the city says this is what we want to do. They charge the RDC with helping. Let's come up with some solutions, because we know that housing in our community is economic development, and that falls right in line with what the RDC is all about.
Remember when we were talking about the UDO? Well, Barbara Domer has an interesting idea borrowed from Salt Lake City's UDO. Here she is with the details.
I feel like there has to be a robust addition to this UDO with regard to housing, and it's not necessarily, I know every UDO has a housing component in it, but I really feel like we need to take what the city directed the community and the city to do, and really expand upon that in our ordinance. And so I was just looking up, in the UDO, and I just looked up one example of what a city has done with regard to putting a component in the UDO, and this is Salt Lake City, where they actually inserted into their UDO that 10% of all new tax dollars from tax increment financing districts are to be put directly into a housing initiative. And so even, I'm excited about 1.75 million because that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm celebrating that. But wouldn't it be, this is really putting your money
into expanding your community.
right.
Yeah.
And so I just really thought that was very exciting. And it's like, let's just, and I think the community would like buy into that.
Oh, yeah.
Tenfold.
Going into this interview, I had heard many criticisms of the RDC. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. Most of the criticisms revolved around two claims: that the RDC is unaccountable to the people, and that they don't efficiently use the revenues they make. So I wanted to ask a question that speaks to that sentiment. And I want you to speak to that. How do we measure the effectiveness of the RDC to serve our community needs as opposed to what the city would be able to do with those potential tax dollars?
So, I think that's a pretty loaded question, and there's a lot to probably unpack there.
Okay.
And so most people, I think it can be challenging to understand how city governments are funded and the resources that come in. Most of 70% of city funding is coming from property taxes, for example. In the state, and you've got, for cities, typically two different you've got a levy limit and you've got a rate limit that impacts your tax rates, and it impacts what a city or school district may be able to capture. And so the argument is, well, the Redevelopment Commission establishes these TIF districts. They're capturing those resources that would otherwise go to a city or to a school. In reality, those entities aren't necessarily losing those dollars because it's not established by the assessed valuation. The city establishes, here's how much we need to raise to be able to establish the services that we have. And so therefore the rate is then established based on the dollars that are needed. So just because we're capturing assessed valuation doesn't mean that there is a shortfall that the city is losing out on. It may mean the property tax rate is higher as a result because we need to have a higher rate to be able to capture the dollars that are needed. I don't know if that makes sense. And so the funds that would be impacted are sort of cumulative funds, which means that the maximum amount of the levy is established, saying this is the tax rate, you can't go above this. And so if we're capturing assessed valuation, then that means there is a shortfall of dollars because your tax rate can't be adjusted. And so if you look at in the Redevelopment Commission, by state statute, we have to report every year what the impact is of the Redevelopment Commission on all of the taxing units. And so we have that. It is on our website. It has going all the way back, I think, for at least the last 10 years. So we report that. We just recently had a meeting with the schools just to kind of go through and to understand those impacts that they have for Valparaiso Community Schools, because they have they passed a referendum, and so therefore a allocation area has no impact on the referendum side of it because that is treated separately. So referendum dollars are not captured by the Redevelopment Commission; those still flow back to the schools. So it's really kind of understanding really the two different, the rate limit and the levy limit of the tax rate and what that impact is. And then so when you do that, you realize that they're not losing dollars, and so it's not like, wow, if all of the assessed valuation that's being captured by the Redevelopment Commission went away, we'd be getting $1 million new dollars. That's not, you're getting the same dollars. What would be different is your tax rate would be lower, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so, so that's kind of, so I think the impact, and I did bring the report for 2024, which is the most recent report. And I want to say for Valparaiso Center Town, or Valparaiso, Washington Township, I want to say it's like 12 cents. Their rate is increased by roughly 12 cents on 100. per $100. That is the impact to them. And so I try to ask people, if you think about Valparaiso, most people don't understand what the redevelopment commission is using those dollars towards. And so if you understand that and you drive around and you look at developments that are happening, I think most people, without a doubt, would say this is a great community. We've got great things going on. It's attractive. We continue to find people that want to move here and live here and do business here and come visit here. And we don't necessarily put a stamp on it and say, well, this roundabout only happened because of a redevelopment commission. And so it's almost try to imagine, if it wasn't there, what would it look like?
Yeah.
And when you start thinking about, okay, it's costing you 12 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, is that, are you getting value for that? And I think people would argue that absolutely you are.
Part of accountability of the RDC is showing the actual projects that they have worked on and are working on. Barbara Domer has this spreadsheet of all those different projects, and in this clip, she talks about where you can find it yourself.
There's so many things. There's so many projects, and federal money and state money and RDC grant match, and it's just like, where can I get it all in one place? And so here we are. And I posted on my website, they issue it quarterly, but all of these projects, the funding sources,
oh, cool.
The engineering team that's been hired to build out, project description, and it's just nice to have this handy. But to the point of some people who are like, well, what are you doing? Some of these, like, there's going to be a trail now that they're going to build from Journeyman's or the transit system,
right,
parking lot to the downtown area.
Oh, cool.
I think it's a really neat idea, but to the point of some of the people who are like, how is that economic development for our community?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's beautifying our downtown. It's going to help people who live in the immediate downtown area. If they commute to Chicago, then they don't even need to take a car to the transit, because they'll have a safe way to walk. And so there's benefits like that too, but it's just very interesting because, so that's one example of what I would call not a dotted line economic development,
right.
But then there's the Marsh Public Lift Station. So it's like, that's happening over by West Street by the hotels, to expand the sewage treatment,
that's important
in that area. Really important, and then we have the, Congressman Mervan secured $1 million for separating the stormwater and the sewer system in the older part of town. Happens to be in District 3, which I'm stoked about. But
that's great.
It's like, I remember when I went on a tour of the sewage treatment facility in 24, Steve Poulos, the director, said, executive director, he said 11% of the city is still on a combined sewer and stormwater. So, everywhere else it's two different, systems, because one doesn't need to be treated as as much as the other, but there's still 11% of our city that has combined. And so now we have a project that's going to be taking place in 2026 that's funded by the federal government through Congressman Mervan's community initiatives. And it's just a couple more blocks of Valparaiso that's going to have this separation.
I think that's important. Can you explain why it's important? I'm going to try to lay out what I think is going on. Obviously, you're not putting in sewage and water into the tap, right? This is the outflow from the houses.
So what happens is it's all going in. The outflow is going into the sewage treatment plant. But a lot of it, the outflow is stormwater.
Okay.
And so it doesn't have to go through that expensive process before it goes eventually into Salt Creek and Lake Michigan and Calumet,
And now for the last ad of this episode of Unscripted with Daniel. Are you looking to start a business? Do you have an existing business but aren't satisfied with your website? Are you running for a local office? Well, I am a freelance developer. I can make your website, and I can make it look good. Now, all you need to do is send me a message at danieljohndonovan.io. That's danieljohndonovan.io. If you don't know how to spell it, you can see it on the screen, or I can spell it out right now. My last name is Dunevant. Thanks. And now, let's get back to Unscripted with Daniel. Let's look at our goals again. Number 1, how can the RDC increase housing attainability? We determined that the RDC can help increase housing attainability through the TIF revenues they capture. 2, do the people I interviewed show a willingness to increase housing attainability? I think both George and Barbara display a willingness to increase housing attainability. Number 3, what is the RDC doing now or potentially will do to increase housing attainability? The workforce housing grants are directly increasing housing attainability. And Barbara's idea for the UDO has a chance of being implemented, which would call for a certain percentage of TIF revenues to be used for housing initiatives. Forgive me for feeling hopeful after listening to all my guests. Bob Thompson shares a similar sentiment about Valpo and its future here. Are you hopeful for the future of Valpo?
Yes.
Why is that?
It's been a great place to live.
Yeah.
It was a great place to raise my daughters. They have moved on, but still love it. Still love coming down to the downtown. It's just a great place. It really is.
Do you think that Valpo should offer more to keep their youth and have more good jobs in order to sort of accommodate
I think they're doing what they can.
Yeah.
But I mean, I do believe that a lot of the youth, when they get out of college, want to take off and find a place. But what is really always nice to hear is how they come back, because it was a great place for schools and raising their families.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think
there's a number of great stories on that.
That's true.
I mean, I left myself, went down to Florida, and realized this was home.
Thanks for watching and listening to this episode of Unscripted with Daniel. I'll see you next time.